Welcome back to another episode of The Hollywood Hang, where we talk about the highs, lows, and hell no's of working in Hollywood. My name is Tepper. I'm one of your hosts.
And I'm Nick, the other host.
And today we are very excited to have Carolina Groppa with us. Carolina is an Emmy-nominated producer. She was previously the executive in charge of production at Issa's HOORAE Media and ColorCreative. She was born in São Paulo, Brazil, and moved with her family to the U.S. when she was a child. Her immigrant upbringing inspired her to work hard to build the career of her dreams. Carolina produced the 2017 Emmy-nominated feature documentary Autism in Love, which explores how adults with autism find and navigate romantic relationships. Her other documentaries include Hysterical 2020 for FX and The Honorable SHYNE for 2024 in Hulu. She is passionate about supporting female filmmakers. She was a co-producer on Netflix's Miss Virginia starring Uzo Aduba and IFC's The Female Brain Whitney Cummings directing debut feature film. She was also a physical producer on Amazon's Sylvie's Love starring Tessa Thompson and Nnamdi Asomugha. She was the UPM and EP on Adamma Ebo's 2020 Sundance hit, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, starring Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown. She is also the creator and host of the hit podcast, Angle on Producers. With over 150 episodes, the show dives deep into the journey of producers and magic makers in our industry to help you navigate your own path. Recent guests include Ali Lowy. She was the executive producer on The Substance, Sev Ohanian, producer of Sinners, and Alex Coco, producer of the Academy Award-winning film Honora. Welcome. We love everyone's faces while we read that.
Well, I was like, am I gonna be on camera while they read this, or is this just gonna be you're off? Okay, well, I wish I would have known. I wouldn't have been so bored. Not that I'm bored by my own bio. It's just like I was like, oh, we're reading the whole thing.
The whole thing. I know. It's like a funny little surprise that we
you just bring on people. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks so much for coming. We have like kind of been. We're in the same universe of like the brave few souls that have like made themselves known on social media, I would say. Would you guys agree?
And with a podcast specifically. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But we normally kind of like dig in, and I kind of want to talk about a little bit since you have I think, a much different upbringing than a lot of our like past guests. So I just kind of want to talk about like, how did you end up realizing you wanted to be a producer? And later in this, guys, because this is the most common question in the world, we will be discussing what type of producer you are, but also all the different types of producers that exist, since it's very confusing.
Yes, hence why I started the podcast, because I'm still figuring it out. So how I got into the sort of my upbringing and how I got into the industry. I mean, so I was born in Brazil, right? You mentioned that. My family came to America when I was 9. And I think that's always an important part of my like origin story, because it really formed sort of my perspectives on identity and learning English as a second language later in life. And like all of that really solidified, I think, how I started to navigate the world and being like a really shy kid. And I think when you come to a different culture as a kid, like you're still really malleable, but it's interesting. It does put like a lid on like who you are in a way. And so I almost had like two personalities, where at home I was like lively and fun and silly. And at school I was very quiet, very reserved, because it was like, I'm here to get good grades and go home. Like, I'm not trying to know any of y'all. Like, I'm just trying to do that immigrant thing and do what right by my parents' sacrifice. But as I got older, I started to learn how to like merge those two things. But I'd always loved television because I learned, English watching TV and movies. And then I just fell in love with movies. Like movies for me, I mean, the Nicole Kidman thing, we come to this place for magic. Like it really is true. Like a darkened movie theater was my happy place. Movies really is what got me in the game. And I would be the person, before even understanding it, who sat through the credits and would just be like having this cathartic life experience watching a film. And I would look over to my dad and he would be like, yeah, so he dies, or something like very, like just like, all right, let's go get popcorn, it just. And I was like, how could you possibly like just be you? Anyway, so I've always had these very like visceral experiences with the arts, and I wanted to create that for other people, basically. And so my into that feeling at the time was what I saw, like many of us. And so I was like, well, I guess I will be the actor because that's what you see. And so acting was great. It really helped me get out of my shell and, like I said, kind of find a way to be the full breadth of my person in all elements. And then and then that was kind of what got me in the game. And I moved out to LA to pursue acting initially through an acting conservatory out here, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And then a couple of years into that journey, which if people really want the deep dive, they can listen to it. I've gone deep into my own podcast about my own journey, but we have more important things to talk about. I found producing. And once I did, I was like, oh, like, I've just been doing this my whole life. I didn't realize that there was like a job title for it, which is kind of funny because at that point I had been in LA for a couple of years and I knew what the word producer existed, but I didn't know what producers did and what it meant to do that, right? And it's been this really cool journey since that was 2010, the very first thing I produced that kind of got me bit by the bug. Since then, I've just been producing nonstop.
What are some of the qualities that you think you had just before you were like a producer that were sort of producer-esque? Like, were you always the kind of person who was, because I feel like it is a specific personality type.
Yeah, I think there's a shared DNA. And after 150 episodes of the show, I definitely think that, and I've been able to really quantify that. And not everyone on the show recently, by the way, we're kind of leaning more towards other creatives, by the way. So it's not just producers, but I think thriving in chaos. I think the endless curiosity of like, I don't know, I've never done this before, but I'm going to figure it out. Right. And just having sort of that gumption and that hustle and that tenacity to figure anything out. And I've always been that way. And I've had to be. It was sort of a survival mechanism for most of my life as an immigrant. But, just being able to translate that and going, I want to do that. I don't know how to do that. Others are doing it. So I'm going to go figure out how to do it. And then you just do it. I mean, it is that simple and that sort of stereotypical, line, but it is. And every time you just kind of get a little bit, you sharpen your tools a little bit more to sort of like understand your process within that.
Yeah, I feel like proactive is like the word I use for like a great producer, because it's like Nick knows, I'm sure you get comments as well. When people ask me questions in my comment, like in my videos that have been answered in the video or are in the caption, I am like, so like, you will not survive in the organizational part of this business. Like you've got to be curious to like go figure something out. And I feel like that's like my favorite thing when I like meet producers, that I'm like, oh, like they'll be like, I don't know how we're going to get people on that roof legally, but like, we're going to figure it out. And by the end of the day, there will be people on that roof setting up a new scene. And that's what's going to go down. I've always like admired that kind of like, just, I don't know, it's just genuinely being smart. I don't know how to explain that in another way.
It's like a big puzzle. And I think you have to enjoy something that the perception of something that feels impossible, and then you make it possible, right? And there are some things that are truly impossible within the span of the time-space continuum and gravity and all these things you can't control. But like, there's always a way to figure something out. And I think like the best producers are the ones that are not naysayers. They're the ones that are like, yes, it's difficult and we're going to figure it out. Yes, we can't shoot here legally, but here's how we're going to find a path to do it in a way. Or there's always just some other creative way to approach problem solving, which is really what it is, right? So you have to love, and like, particularly when you get into production, where it's like everything we've all been working towards, you have those precious 11 or 15 days, right, to make a feature. It's all riding on that time. That's everything you worked so hard for years sometimes. And so to your ability to like be able to problem solve like day in and day out, second after second, and just be able to keep it moving, because once that train has taken off, like you just got to get to the end where you're going. You don't have time to sort of get into all of it, which is why I think having this period of mourning and grieving and like processing, frankly, once you wrap a show is so important, because especially if it's an indie, it's a feature, it's something that you're sort of really pushing those boulders uphill. It takes a lot out of you. It has to. It's a creative, collaborative art form. Like if it doesn't take it out of you, I would wonder how much you're really bringing to what you're doing. If it doesn't cost you anything, kid, it's like, are you even living? You know what I mean? It's like one of those.
Yeah. And I know this is something that I've just realized, and I don't know if like there's always a title to these different types of producers, but some producers, like when we talked to Roy Lee, Roy was like, I love development. I am really enjoying that portion of it. You're not going to find me on set unless I've really got to be there.
Yeah.
Could you kind of talk about like all of the different ways or the types kind of producers that there like can be, and like what I think that's like, I think you talked about this on a podcast, one of your episodes recently, where it was kind of like you as the artist need to know what you need out of a producer before you're just like, give me a producer.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to dating. Like, I think if you just throw spaghetti at the wall, you can't be bummed when you're not getting like some great, conversations out of these first dates or whatever. Like, you have to really be intentional. And so I think like doing your homework as an artist is a part of it. Like the biz development of who you have to be to like, again, increase your chances so you don't get lost in the bottom feeding aspects of this industry, especially, is super important. And I always put the onus on young people who reach out for advice, creatives. It's like, if you want to do the homework and come back with like these 3 people, I will gladly figure out how to do XYZ, but rarely do they come back, right? So I think there's so much within the producing umbrella. You have television, which is its own beast. And so when I'm talking about producing, I'm generally talking about film, because that's where film and unscripted, right? And docs, because that's where I mostly have worked. TV is a writer's medium, as you guys know. And so writers are producers. On television, they have to produce their own episodes. They have to be there in a perfect world to be able to make changes on the day to the script that's going to impact what production's doing, et cetera. You have your non-writing EPs, which are typically people that have crossed over a little bit from line producing and they have more of a physical production background, or perhaps they've come up on the development side, but there's not one sort of trajectory that puts anybody on that particular path. So it's even impossible to quantify, like, how do you do that? Who does that? And non-writing EPs on TV are different depending on what the show needs also. So it's like, great, really difficult to even quantify. But in film, I feel like it is a little bit more structured where the producer fits in. Because if you look at shows like The Offer, a producer in film really used to be the person that was like, there was 1 or 2 of you and you were doing everything. You were with that from cradle to the grave. And you had to have the gumption to be the person doing anything and everything to get your movie made. And at that time, yes, like, being in cahoots with the mafia. And one could say that much hasn't changed. One could say much hasn't changed, but I think that typically on the independent side, you have your producers that have been more on the creative, right? So they have come up through development. These are folks that perhaps worked a desk at an agency and then were working at a production company. They start maybe as a coordinator level or an assistant level, CE level, and they work their way up. And folks in the production companies themselves are also producing, right? They're development folks who also produce. And so depending on how those companies are structured, you have sometimes development execs, folks that have been more on a desk job, if you will, than producing. Oftentimes, a lot of those people don't have set experience unless they've really purposely sought it out for themselves in the beginning of their career. They don't really have it. Like, I've worked with a ton of people who are at high levels who like don't understand the nuances of set, who've never even been on a set, whether their boss never gave them the opportunity as they rose the ranks. And what I find funny is that sometimes those people get then tapped later on in their careers to like run a production company for someone else. And I'm like, okay, like you're obviously brilliant when it comes to development and sourcing material and knowing the sort of like puzzle piece of the creative part of the process on the front end, which is super important. But you're missing such a huge part of your knowledge.
The production part
you don't
of
understand.
the production company.
The production part, which I venture to say is the most important. That's where the thing is made. That's where the sausage is made. And then when you get into post, you have another chance to like reshape the sausage that probably came out real wonky, but like you get to like reshape it. And so the producers that understand physical production, in my humble opinion, are the ones that can withstand the volatility of our industry a lot more, because regardless of what development is doing and how long that takes, you can kind of like be thrown in the arena and you can go make stuff happen. And so within the indie side, you have the EPs, and those folks are typically people that are putting money into a project, or they bring in an element, right? They attach a high piece of cast. Sometimes they're talents managers and you have to deal with those folks. Sometimes they're brilliant and they bring a lot to the table, but most of the time they don't. And I think there's been a lot of nipping that in the bud, which I have appreciated, because it's all gotten so top heavy, as you guys know, with the producing side. But then you have, your line producer, your UPM, your unit production manager, which is actually a DGA position, typically falls actually under the purview of the director. It's part of the director's team. And so when folks say, oh, well, the line producers and the UPMs, they're not creative, you're just like a logistical, physical production person, I find that so insulting, because it's like we're all moving towards the same goal. They're coming up with ways to problem solve. Maybe they're not giving you script notes, or they're not, coming up with alts on whatever, on casting, but everything is all in service of the creative. And so we're all sort of obeying the same master, which is the script and the project and the film at the end of the day. That's always what we're doing, everything in service of. But those are the folks that really understand, like, how to go from script to screen, how to take what's on the page, come up with a production plan, whether that's how you're going to raise the financing, how you're going to shoot it, what's going to be realistic for that particular project, this moment in time in the marketplace, the number that you should be making it for, given all the elements that you have, right? Who's your cast? Who's your director? What's your distribution plan? Are you just going to take it to festivals? Are you okay with just maybe being like a festival darling that doesn't sell? Like, all of those conversations have to be had on the front end, so that you can set up those projects up for success. And so in the indie realm, you wear a lot of hats. And I think that's great, because you get to sharpen a lot of skills early on. And so that if you do eventually work in a more traditional sort of like within the studio system, you just have so much more that you're able to bring to the table than if perhaps you've invested in only going up maybe a development track. And you, especially as you get older, right? And life is going to life. You're like, you're not going to go, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to go get on-set experience as a PA in my mid-30s. Like, you could, and I applaud anyone who wants to do that, but most would agree that it's much easier to get that experience and that knowledge that first year when you're still young and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, So that's like a very all over the place explanation, but yeah.
Would you say you're most like in your element on a set?
I would say that's where I'm most comfortable. Yeah, because I love the chaos of set. Like, I love the organized chaos. I love all the different kinds of people. I love that that's where the magic happens. And that what I love is that, regardless of how the project turns out, as a producer, that's your opportunity to really make that experience for all the best it can be. So not everything is going to feel like camp, but we try to make it as much as we can, right? Because again, you've worked so hard. The timeline of production is so compressed and it's so intense, and you're at best getting to make cool stuff with cool people, and you have to remember our why, and that we get to do this, and what a privilege that we get to tell stories for a living. And that matters. Like, it doesn't take away that it's hard, but like, you have to ground in why you're there every day. And so I like to bring that to my sets, and like to make sure that the people that are showing up for me, that they know that I've got their backs and that I care about them as humans and not as like a line item, and that their experience of making this film with me and my team is just as important as anything else.
Something that I think, like, a lot of people listening to this, and maybe there's a lot of crossover in the audience too. I feel like the people listening to this are young writers, maybe like actors, filmmakers, and they're in their head going like, the one thing I need is a producer that's going to like make this thing happen for me. And I think it's so often that people forget that like producers also have like dreams, aspirations, and things in their way. Yeah. And so what would you say are like the things that you're like, I also want to make stuff, but these are my blockages right now, like in just Hollywood today, I guess?
Like as a producer, you mean, or as a person who has, I mean, I think that it's really easy to get caught in the, well, you're really good at this one thing, and so people just keep hiring you to do this one thing. So like, who wants to say no to that thing that you're so good at, right? Mm-hmm. And you can do that and then blink and go, holy shit, well, like, I'm really good at this, but this wasn't like my dream. Like, I wasn't look, I love me a spreadsheet. I love getting to like make budgets and do all of that. But is my life's dream to be like line producing other people's projects forever? Like, no. I'm really grateful that I've had that. I'm grateful that it's let me have build a really great experience of the collaboration, the communication, all of these hard skills you have to get that have nothing to do with the creative process, just in managing people. That's really what you get from being that on set for as long as I have. But it does put you in a lane where everyone's like, oh, well, you're this now. Like, you couldn't possibly also be a creative producer. You couldn't possibly understand like a 3-arc structure, or, you know what I mean? Or like 3-act structure, or how, or like what a good script is, or go package your own films. And so I know a lot of people that can get stuck, if that's their goal, in the line producing lane, and they want to like shift over to be capital P producing and being seen as that producer, right? But oftentimes it's like, well, we just want you to like worry about the budget and the schedule, and then we'll go over here and talk about, you know, we'll be the ones talking about casting or any of the creative stuff that comes up. I've seen that time and time again. And so I think if anyone has ambitions to shift lanes, unfortunately, no one's going to give you that opportunity. You just have to like kind of force it upon people, frankly, until you start to be seen. And I know a lot of producers who've been on the podcast have had similar like hardships where they really had to align themselves with a writer director and then grow as their producer, but they started as a line producer or whatever, and really, again, like make others perceive them in the ways that they want to be perceived, so it's closer in alignment with like their goals, if that makes sense.
I feel like right now in the industry, it's obviously a transition period, I guess we could say, but we get so many people hitting us up that's like, how do I get any job? And then, you know, you hear of other people who get pigeonholed doing the same thing. And it's like, on the one hand, like, it's great to be doing any job in Hollywood. Like, same with writing. Like, if you're getting paid to write a vertical or whatever you're getting paid to write, like, it's very hard to get any job. But it's also, like, so many people, I know so many writers who are like really successful, but they're like, I don't want to keep writing on all this IP and like this movie or this giant animated movie. And it's like, it is, I don't know, the grass is always greener. And it's like, this person desires what that person has, but that person is like, yeah, but I really want to do this thing. And I'm not like that happy. And it's all, you know, it's all so subjective.
I call it the sickness. It's the sickness of our industry, truly, because I think the kinds of people that gravitate toward even being here, leaving families, leaving everything to come to the bigger markets, right? Because you can now do a lot remotely, and there's value in that. You don't have to physically be in LA, New York. But if you are the kind of person that's leaving all that behind, you have big ambitions. You're sort of never satisfied in a lot of ways. And that's what keeps you sharp and always, you know, hungry for the next thing. And that, I think, is the ultimate challenge that I encourage everyone to start therapy as soon as they can, because it never goes away, is my point. Like, I've met people at the highest levels and they're still not satisfied. And they're still like, yeah, but I want to be doing this. And you're just like, no one's ever really happy. No one ever really arrives. And so I think the people that can, seem to be able to look back on their lives and what they've built and feel like proud of that are the folks that can really, yes, and, you know, they can just like two truths can coexist, you know, and you have to find space and hold space for both of those. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but like, I think you have to sort of go where things are showing you. Maybe that's where you want to be. You have to like lean into that, but also hold space for like, but I never want to abandon this possibility. And also realize that maybe one day you wake up and your priorities have shifted and you go, wow, I always thought I wanted X, but now I want a family, or I want to be single forever and travel and have more space for other things in my life. And you just kind of make those choices as they come up. But yeah, it's really hard. I don't know anyone who's like fully fulfilled and happy. Have you met anyone who's and they aren't medicated?
That was actually like I think we like at the end of the episode me and Nick talk about like the hell no's, and mine might have been getting on the blacklist, because it just came with like this anxiety of like, now I got to do the next thing, or like no one's gonna buy it, and then like what does that mean in the whole scheme of things? And like I couldn't enjoy for even a second like the accomplishment, because I was like, next, and like then that's gonna happen, and then that. And I think like it's a perpetual cycle where like I need to chill the F out and be like, look, like how nice that I in the last year like wrote a few things.
That's what I mean. You can get to set on your first day and be like, oh, well, the burritos are cold, or this isn't where I wanted it to be. And it's like, okay, yes, but holy shit, it's the first day of your movie. You're getting to make a movie. Like, not everything's going to be perfect. Are you able to like step aside and zoom out? Zoom out. You know what I mean? That's the biggest, most important thing anyone can do. And that's why I think like leaving LA every so often is so important, because we all like, you can try as hard as you want, but you can't escape it. It's everywhere. If you want to go hiking, you can't be hiking. Someone's going to be talking about something. Always. Unless you're like deep into something else. If you just want to be listening to the birds and be in nature, you can't, because you may overhear something that's going to trigger you, you know? So you have to just go to places where this isn't so important and so front and center all the time. Because yes, it's important and it matters, but there's so much more life and so much more that it can be experienced and has also so much value. And I just encourage folks to try to find that balance for themselves, because you can get real lost in all of it.
It's also a balance between, I don't know, I feel like in recent years, there's been a pushback against the idea that, oh yeah, we must suffer to make films, or like the artist has to suffer. And yeah, I agree that shouldn't be like the standard for, well, we're going to, you know, like making a movie is obviously super stressful, but like if people are completely losing their minds and it's to that point, like it's not necessary. But I think a little bit of that, like that is kind of what drives everybody, right? Like I think when I was an assistant, I was like so stressed, but I was also like probably more motivated than I've ever been, because I was really, really trying to like get to the next phase. And I feel like you see it with filmmakers who make like a really small indie movie, and then for their next movie they do something with Marvel or like something that's 100 times bigger. And of course there are things that's like, well, you're working with 100 times more people now and it's harder to navigate that. But also I feel like if you just give somebody a stupid amount of money, how come so many of those projects end up like, it's because that person doesn't have that like fight or flight thing anymore. That's like, I have to do this 110% because I have to progress, you know, my life.
Yeah. I mean, the comparison of like your particular film that you may have spent all this time wanting to make, that is your baby, your first, second, third baby. Indie films tend to have that, right? And then in contrast with the other extreme of like a Marvel movie, where this is a huge IP for stakeholders. You're essentially a for hire person who has like some vision that they want, or your name is, you know, currently got high value in the marketplace. But at the end of the day, you're not commanding that army in the way that you are on your independent feature. Like, you are there to be in service of the corporation. And it's a very different style of working. It's a different way of like, again, managing people and communication. And that's something that comes up so much on the podcast with everyone I talk to, no matter who. It's like, that seems to really be like the secret sauce of like, beyond like how good you are at what you can do. It's like how you navigate and how you move and dealing with the people of this industry, whether we're talking about on set or how you network, how you sort of like can put things together, like all of that. The people that have kind of figured that out for themselves are the ones that seem to just be like crushing it, you know? It's my perspective anyway. Yeah.
And like for you, kind of in that like communication thing, like how have you like use that obviously to your advantage? Like, you've moved up the ranks, you've worked across like multiple mediums, I guess you would say, with like docs and everything. And like, what are the skills that you've realized help you in communicating through all of these different channels and kind of like getting onto your next project? Because normally it is like, I met somebody and now we're going to work together on this next thing.
Yeah. It's really like fine-tuning your approach to what you're saying and what you want and need from that person. And that changes depending on what it is. But I think the best example I can give is like the way that you're going to communicate on set, especially with with a department head versus a PA versus your accountant, if you're talking about the same information, is inherently different, right? And that's just like a micro example of how you can communicate the same information, but in slightly different ways. And to me, that's no different than like screenwriting or acting, right? It's like scene work. It's like, well, I still have this need. I still want to communicate this idea. It's not landing in this way for this person. I still need to get what I need from them. How do I approach them? So I think it really starts with being observant and starting to understand just people, psychology, humanity. Like, how do people operate? What is their why? How are they doing today? You know, and once you start to kind of get a sense of that, especially there are certain archetypes within our industry, you can kind of go, okay, you're one of those people. So I'm going to have to come and we're going to gossip and chit chat for 10 minutes before I can get to like the why I'm calling you. And some people are just like, what? You know, and you
like,
could be
what do you
like,
want? Just tell me.
What do you want? And you could be like, oh my gosh, they're so curt and they're so dismissive and they don't want to get to know me. But it's like they're so busy, and the fact that they're returning your call, right? So you can just go right into it and they'll appreciate that, right? So like, I think you have to really understand that there's so many different kinds of folks and be really clear about what it is that you want and how you're going to go about communicating that want. And like, that comes with maturity and time and a lot of trial and error. Like, you don't hit it out the gate. But frankly, mirroring is huge, right? That's why as you're rising the ranks, getting to be in rooms where you see folks above you, how they talk to certain people, how they position, giving feedback that is difficult in a room to writers, like all of that is super important, because you hopefully absorb all of that, you internalize it, and then it becomes your own version of that. You're doing your own version of that, that again, you fine tune every single time. And so for me, it's really come from that. It's just the gift of like, for a lot of the folks I've worked with, every project mentors me in some way. I'm like, oh, I'm going to take this piece. I like how this person deals with that. Oh, they can bring humor into a situation and it's okay. It's like professional to deal with this difficult moment. Okay. Like, I'm going to do that because that's something that feels organic to who I am already. I wasn't clear that that was something I could do. And now I see it modeled. And so I'm going to find my way in that.
What do you tell people? Because I'm assuming, being a person who is a producer and has a podcast and has, you know, social media platform, like, I'm assuming you get as many messages as we do. The messages that we get are like, what do I do with my script? Or how do I be a screenwriter? Or another one I get is like, I've applied to 200 assistant jobs and I didn't get any of them. Now what do I do? And I'm like, I don't know. But at this moment in the industry, you know, obviously producing really, really tough jobs, similar to screenwriting, a job that is notorious for, it can take a very long time to get paid. And, you know, you have to get stuff made to get paid. And so with where we're at now, like, what is your answer for when people are like, I want to be a producer, or like, I listen to your podcast, I just got out of film school, I want to be a producer? Because my answer has changed. Like, I mean, it changes every 6 months as the industry changes. But what do you tell people?
What's your answer? I want to know your answer.
I mean, my answer, like, when I first started posting on social media years ago, I would say I was much more like, anything is possible, and it's just gotten more and more realistic. And now what I say is
some things are possible. Yeah.
Now what I tell writers is like, focus on getting a steady income first. Like, get something that's super stable, and then, you know, it's like the opposite. So I don't know.
I always say, like, whether you're writing or you're producing, whatever you want to do, you have to just start where you're at. So what that means is, don't write a script. You got to make your first short. Don't write a script that's going to cost you $50,000 to make, that you don't want to raise, you don't want to spend. Be smart. Do your homework. Like, I'm not saying don't think about your passion and your voice, but the question always is, how do you take what you want to do and put it in a container that makes sense, that is actually executionable for where you're at right now, period. You know, so like, if you know, by looking at everyone else talking about, if every grant is $20,000 for a short, and you don't want to spend that, or hope and a wish and a prayer that you'll get that for your first thing, like, how do you make it for less? Well, you start to get creative. You start to think before you even write, right? Well, I have an uncle who owns a boat. Okay, cool. And then I also have, what do I have that's already in my, like, I feel like you don't have, like, people always think that they don't have anything, right? Well, I don't have this, I don't have that. It's like, well, can you look at what you do have? Make a list of what you have that is accessible, right? Even if it starts out basic, there's a house, I have a car, and then think more creatively outside of that. Because if you're going to go make a short, we've seen those shorts. So what other physical spaces that are going to bring up production value of what you're doing that you already have access to, that you can bring into this? Okay, my sister owns a smoothie place. I can shoot at the smoothie place. I can turn it into a spa interior. All right, I can write something really interesting in this setting. And then think about it from that perspective, right? So then you're already kind of checking a lot of boxes. And I think that it is the onus on writers is to really think producerially. Like, you kind of have to. I think the days of just like, well, I wrote this and it's a masterpiece and you're just going to go figure out how to make it and I'll just be over here and let me know my call time. You know, it's like, you got to roll up your sleeves and all hands on deck. And again, that tenacity, a lot of people who say that they want to like make their thing, I just don't think they have that. It's not that they're not necessarily great at the creative or have brilliant ideas, but when it comes time to actually like do the work, a lot of people don't want to do the work. And so when they say, well, I want a producer, it's like, that's what they want. They want someone else to do the work for them. And then they'll just show up and like get to do the fun parts of the process. And it's like, that's not fair. And unless you're paying that person a lot of money, which of course you're not, because obviously you're not, like, how is that fair to them? And what incentive do they have? So when folks say, well, I just need a producer, the answer I have is like, make a list of what you need in a producer. What is it that you need? Are you looking for someone who's going to help you raise your money? Are you looking for someone who has a certain pedigree that brings, you know, whatever, a higher level to your project? Is it just their name that you need because you're trying to do X? Or do you really need someone who's going to know how to make your short film? Like, and I keep using short because, again, that's where most folks kind of start, right? But maybe someone jumps straight into their feature. And remember that these individuals that have dreams and lives and goals and also need to go have jobs that pay them money to be able to produce, are probably doing this because they want the credit, they want the experience, but they're working for free. And unlike crew, and again, the writer or director of a piece, like, that's your baby. You're going to go to the festivals, you're going to take it, and hopefully it does great things. The producer has none of that, right? Like, nobody even, they just started recently including even the producer's name on programs at festivals. Producers put all of his time and energy. Yeah. And they're the last regarded person. And then it's like a short film. You think, well, it's just a couple of days. That person probably has been working for like 3 to 6 months on that project.
Yeah.
And if they got paid $1,000 flat, which is like, whoa, a huge win, like, that's never going to be enough money. And again, so what is the psychology of why someone chooses to do that? What do they want? Well, they want to build a relationship with you as the writer director. They want to be that success story. Like, they want to be the Steve Ohanian to the Ryan Coogler. Like, everybody wants to find that kind of magical partnership that starts out in the early days and you can rise the ranks together, but few ever do. And I think a huge part of that is, again, not really, it's like dating. It's a professional marriage, really being like intentional about what you're looking for and then being malleable and being willing to grow with that person. I think a lot of folks are just sort of transactional and they're like, well, I just need you to do this for me and you're the producer and you should be able to da 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 da. And it's like, well, that's not really how it works, you know, especially when you're at the beginning of your career. And even as you rise up, like, it's the same thing as you do features. It's the same microcosm that I just described. It's just a longer period with more at stake, more money, more resources needed, more reputation at stake, you know? So that's like my little soapbox, but yeah.
The cynical take on that, because I always think in terms of like snarky, cynical comments that people leave on my page where they kind of take what I'm saying and they're like, oh, so blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel like the cynical take on that is, oh, so everyone in Hollywood is just looking for someone else that can also help them. Like, but it kind of is. Like, all relationships are formed based on why would I do this? Everyone's working basically off of passion. So like, what do I get out of it? What do you get out of it? Like, that is based, I mean, even like human interaction. Yeah. Of course, everybody wants something.
It's a collaborative art form.
Yeah.
If you want to be a solo genius making your own art and be like, I don't need anybody, that's fine. But then like, you'll just be writing scripts all day that don't get produced. You'll be acting all day with Zoom and just doing scene study classes. And you'll be a producer who's just like ideating on things that would be cool to do one day, you know? If you are not interested in collaborating, this is not the industry for you. We all need people. And yes, the snarky sort of cynical take on that is that everybody just is using somebody. Yes, they are. So then be really smart about who is using you, who you're investing in, and who you want to, you know, build a professional career with, because we all need each other at different points. And I think there's the gross way to go about how you navigate being that kind of person, or there's the place of like authenticity of like, I need your help, I need your support. That is the same thing, just in a kinder way, right? To the snarky version of that. And I think it's, again, it comes back to like a choice that I always talk about. Like, I can't make you be a better version of yourself. Like, you have to choose how you're going to show up to this collaborative art form that is difficult and ego driven, and a sickness of everyone's never happy, it's never good enough. Like, you have to choose how you're going to show up to all of that. And I can't, like, you know, make that choice for you. And I also think we all have periods and ebbs and flows of our own lives. And sometimes we show up not the best version of ourselves too. And sometimes we do. You're in a good space and like you kind of can zoom out and like feel good about it. But sometimes, especially in these last few years we've had, there is like a desperation and an angst and a sadness that is palpable in everybody, you know? And that's okay. And And again, I've been here for almost 20 years. I've gotten really close to being like a cynical, bitter asshole many times. But at the end of the day, like, that's just not who I want to be in the world. And if the industry has to turn me into that so I can exist here, I'm just not interested. Like, I'm really not. It's just, I used to put all of my worth and my stock in what I was doing and what I was achieving and my professional aspirations here. And then I just said, you know what, like, I'm kind of done with that. Like, I'm not giving up. I still want to achieve. And of course, I still want to, who doesn't want to be Oscar nominated one day? But like, there's just more to my world and my capabilities than just this. And if this isn't where I'm meant to be, cool, bring it. You know, what a cool chapter of my memoir that I get to write.
Like the secret to being happy in Hollywood, because I mean, I started working at Sony Animation in 2020, so I've only been in like a professional writer for 5 years, but I feel like what you have to do is basically build the plan of like where you want to be in X amount of time. But in order to be happy, you have to accept the fact that if you have not gotten there, that is still okay. Because I didn't used to think like that. I used to think like, if I'm not here by this year, I'm a failure. I'm not doing as well as my friends. Like, and it's really only been like the last year or like post-strike, just the communal like angst and sadness that you described, or just like acceptance, like that everyone has that has like allowed me to be like, oh, it's okay if I'm not at the place I wanted to be by this year. You know, but it's still good to set goals. But like, if you consider yourself a failure, if you don't meet those goals, then you're just going to like quit.
I think you have to be open to the path zigging and zagging. And what you were just saying, this time of like staying a couple years in a job and then you get promoted and you get bumped up, and that sort of hierarchy, that doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. Like that's almost like an arbitrary goal to step into this with. A lot of people that are at assistant or CE level right now are going to be stuck there for a couple of years, if not more. Look at what's continuing to happen. The market contractions. There's literally not enough jobs for the amount of people that are here, because so many jobs were created to keep up with the demand of the streaming boom that we had from 2020, you know, until 23 basically. So all these companies popped up, a bunch of people were promoted and got jobs that they were maybe not ready for. Some people were, and then all of that ended. And where are all those people going to go? So I think a lot of folks are going to leave the industry because they're going to see that there is no place for them here anymore. That is, quote unquote, I want to say easy or more stable, or a perception of like, okay, if you do this, then yes, in a couple of years this happens, because it has to. We're sort of back in the Wild West. And that's my impression of this industry. It's like every 20 years, there's a tectonic shift and the pendulum swings, and the people that can be nimble and like little dinghies out there in the ocean, as I like to say, are the ones that kind of tend to withstand all of that volatility that's happening at the top that trickles down and impacts all of us. And so this is the best time in a lot of ways to be a creative because of the access that we have, right, to technology and to find different ways to tell your stories. But if you're trying to break into traditional Hollywood through these traditional means that you've read about or seen on Entourage like 20 years ago, like you're chasing something that almost doesn't really exist anymore. So I would encourage folks listening to think more entrepreneurially, to be, did it freeze? To be more innovative. Yeah, to be more innovative in how they're thinking about going about it. Like, you got to keep turning over all those rocks. Like, if you're not going to get the traditional, and again, the volume, you're one of like maybe 1,000 applying for something now, where maybe before it was one of 100, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I kind of feel like it was, me and Nick have talked about this a lot, like this constriction was just inevitable. Like, you can't bring all of this tech money in and then all the investors are like, wait, we're not making any money. And then like think that continues forever. Unfortunately, for better or worse, like that's what it was. But I do think like kind of to what you were just saying, like there are more ways than ever to figure out your own path in this. And I think, at least like for me and like the era that I got to LA in and that I've like kind of like grown in this industry is like, I am very open. Obviously, we actually all are, to like using other means, digital, if you end up making maybe like a web series or a vertical or whatever, and then like, but I think the still end goal is always like the traditional version of that.
of course.
And what does that
yeah.
look like for like you right now and like the people that you're working with? Are they also seeing that transfer too?
I think what's interesting is I'm seeing a lot of the opposite. I'm seeing a lot of people that were in high places that I always admired and was like, maybe I'll be there one day, coming to me being like, how do I make an indie film? Like, how do I do this? How do I make a movie for under $10 million? You know, and I'm like, okay, like, that's all I know how to do, but let me help you because you've been making movies for 60 million or whatever your whole career. So I'm seeing a lot of that, like folks just having to like go back down to sort of like where budgets really are and having to understand how to operate in those spaces and really struggling to understand it. But like I said, a lot of people that were studio level, you know, high level folks that I know in my community, a lot of them are either unemployed or have taken like other jobs to just try to like survive, or are just putting in projects together independently. You know, you saw the spec market's hotter than it's ever been. I think that whoever can figure out a model of how you make films for a certain price point that makes sense for this market that we're in, given how fucked distribution is and how difficult it is to get your movie seen and found, like that's the next frontier that we have to fight. And I also don't think that like, I think short form content, and for me, I define short form as anything that's like, you know, web series kind of based, like episodes that are less than 10 minutes, I guess, because I've learned that the younger generations, for them, short form is anything under a minute. So I wanted to like clarify that. I learned that recently, and that was shook. If the kids even say shook, I don't know. But yeah, so I feel like you have to like take all of that into consideration, I guess. I think I lost my point there. I got distracted.
In terms
By
of
the shook.
By the shook. I shook myself out of my thought.
in terms of the distribution, like as someone who works in indie film, because post-strike, everybody was saying, oh, we're going to have an indie boom. Indie filmmaking is going to have a boom because of like the gap that was left in the shutdown with the studio system. So did you see that indie boom post-strike that everyone was talking about? Because I know a lot of people are making their own stuff now, but I also know so many filmmakers who have had a really hard time getting even their very micro budget or low budget films bought by a distributor right now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think getting your film made is one thing. And then the next challenge is, okay, but then who buys it and how much do they buy it for? And that's really difficult. I mean, I know a lot of folks who like have taken great indies that did get made, that went to festivals, South by, Sundance this year, that still have not found distribution. I have Mark Ankner, who was on the podcast that I did an episode with South by. He used to be a financing agent at WME and was like a partner, and then left to go become a producer. And I was very like, eye roll. Okay, Mark, how hard was it for you to be a producer when you come from all this connection? And he was really honest about how hard it was, even for him, of just like, you think that just because you're, again, at a certain level or you've reached a certain part of the job in the machine of Hollywood, that things all of a sudden just flow to you. And he was like, no, like learning to actually put things together, learning how to make a movie for $3 million. He had a film that he took to South by that he mentioned, like, if it had been 3 years ago, they would have made their money back 10x based on the sale. And like the offers that were coming in are so insulting that it's almost like, what do? Do you take it so at least you have some shot of distribution, or do you just say fuck you and like put your movie up on YouTube and try to monetize it yourself? So that's kind of the reality for most folks. And I know there's a lot of people, Ted Hope and a lot of folks on Film Stack, creating the Film Stack community, really trying to address this distribution issue, because that is a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, I think there always is an indie boom, but what is the quality of those films is always the other question, because I think there's different types of indies within the indie umbrella, and you can have these amazing hits, but when you are making something, again, on a constrained budget, you better make sure your creative supports that budget. Otherwise, if you're trying to make your movie look like it costs $5 million and you have $500,000, like, it may be really hard to hit that target. And then you just fall short of like delivering a great story. That's just like, we're not trying to pretend what we are not. This is who we are, I think that's why films like that kind of kicked off this boom, like The Puffy Chair that, the Duplass brothers were doing, were so brilliant, because they're just like simple, dumb concepts that were just done super well. They weren't trying to be anything other. They were just like, we know we have this amount of money. What is the best thing we can do with what we have available? And that's what I think really started that sort of movement 20 years ago that inspired so many of us in that indie sort of resurgence. I do think we'll get back there, but until we're done with all of these mergers and things, and there's a little more enthusiasm in the marketplace, less fear-based, risk-averse, I think it's going to be tricky. And I'll also say this, like, there was a day when independent film really meant like everyone was sort of a new voice. You had unknown actors and unknown writers. And now it's like, it's an independent film only because the financing is not put together from a studio. But it's Scarlett Johansson's directorial debut. You know what I mean? But it's got like Oscar Isaac in this $2 million movie because he just loved the script. And that's great. We love that. But I think that takes away from the true spirit of what indies were and how they could launch people, and did in fact launch people. So I hope we get back to some version of that. We have these outliers here and there, but it's like less and less that. It's like, if you don't have, a Nepo baby somehow involved, it feels like no one's that interested.
My crossover,
and we love Nepo babies.
Right here, we do. I love a good Nepo baby. My crossover here is, I am so excited for Caleb Heron's Trash Mountain.
Wait, do you know that my producer is making that right now?
No.
Yeah, he's literally on set. My producer, Ben Gojer.
Tell us about it.
He's in Chicago. Can I go meet him? Because they're filming in Chicago. I would like to meet.
I didn't even put that together. You're in Chicago right now.
Nick. Okay, I do. I can't meet Caleb Heron. I love him too much. I should just watch from a distance. But I've loved him online. I've only really known him through podcast clips, but I'm like, his humor, he's so smart. I loved his HBO comedy special. And now he's got this feature script that he co-wrote, and he is filming it right now. And I do think there's like something really synergistically perfect for him. And I've read the script, so I love the story already. But like, so I'm just really excited, like, to watch that be an indie, but also be the digital creator space kind of experience.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't the same, but One of Them Days was I thought it was one of the funniest movies, and I think they made it for 15 million, and then it made 55. Like, we can still do it, but it's just, that was my random.
Yeah. And I know that movie also had a lot of like stop starts and was really tough to kind of get up and running. Like, they always have a lot of challenges behind the scenes, but I think about someone like Rudy Mancuso, who is like a YouTuber dude, and he made this movie called Musica for Amazon that I was blown away by it. As a fellow Brazilian, I just couldn't believe that he was able to do something that was the perfect amalgamation of like sort of everything he's known for on YouTube and social media, and he was able to really come up with a narrative structure that worked, but do it all on like a slightly higher production value that made sense again for the world of the movie. But he was able to weave a narrative in that. And it's like, is it the best movie ever? Not necessarily, but it's unique. It takes risks. It's got a unique voice and a unique perspective. So it's like, that film, I think, came out last year at South by. I don't know how much of a push it got. I think it was acquired by Amazon. I don't know how much of a push it got, but like, I think about folks like that when people have just such a singular vision, they will always find a way to make their stuff, whether it's short form on YouTube or TikTok or wherever, and then someone sees the value and then wants to Hollywoodify it and bring it into sort of like the major leagues, if you will, which is, again, dismissive to say that others that are creating not in the Hollywood system are doing something that isn't impressive or anything like that, because I actually don't think that's true.
I think that's like the hard, like, I actually think it's like almost harder. Our friend Spencer like was just out in LA to do, Spencer gets a call out every episode, but he makes content on TikTok and Instagram, like these really short, like 1 minute, like scary videos. And it was like all these meetings, kind of him trying to be like, everyone's asking like, okay, what would you do if you could elevate this and you got a little bit more budget? And like, what's the story you want to tell? And so I think it's becoming a more frequent conversation for people who like really have found their singular voices and like know what their like skill set is. That's like kind of exciting to see online. And what was, besides wanting to tell people like what producers do on, a day-to-day basis with your podcast, was there another reason that you were like, I need to start explaining this and I need to like show what these skills are and like kind of start connecting people? Like what was the impetus, just teaching people, or was there a bigger?
There's been a lot of reasons, and it's definitely morphed because I've been doing this show for 6 years now. But in 2018, the podcast space wasn't as saturated. I mean, it still was, but it wasn't as, not every comedian had a podcast. Like Armchair Expert didn't exist. And when in our industry, really all you had was like script notes and maybe Todd Gardner's podcast. And these are all wonderful, but frankly, perspectives of white men. And I was like, there's no one else talking about this. There's no women talking about this. No one's talking to the producer. Certainly no one cares. Like I care. And I was having a lot of these conversations off like more than teaching, just about like how hard this is, the reality of what this is. And this idea of like, is it like this for you? How do you deal with the situation? Because oftentimes, especially when you're on the physical side, like you're on set, like there's only one or two of you. You're not getting to do that job with another person. So you don't know how another line producer does X or how they deal with a certain challenge, right? Or how physical producer does. So having that sense of like community to talk, a space where we could talk as openly as we can on mic about stuff was really the sort of genesis of why I started it, but also because I was really locked into the indie space and I wanted to understand, well, how does TV function? And wait, so you are at a production company, but you're also a producer on this project? Like why and how? Like what are your contributions? How does that work? Right? Because again, I have always been on the margins of Hollywood. So everything I've done and everything I've learned, I've had to carve those opportunities out for myself. I've had to turn over every stone. I've had to find a way every single time. Like few things have been actually handed to me. And I also didn't understand early in my career that I could have worked a desk and I could have gone and worked at a production company and that could have led to a job as a producer. Like that wasn't clear to me. I thought that to be a producer, you had to go be physically making stuff. You had to go be producing. Like you can't, if you're sitting in an office, like you're not doing the full job of a producer. So there was a lot of misinformation that I was given as well. And I was like, well, if this helps other people navigate their path a little bit quicker and have some insight into what it's actually like to do this and live in this lifestyle, not just the work, but to live in the lifestyle of a person who does this work, then how great, that I can be a conduit for that. And also lastly, like in 2015, after Autism in Love and all of that chapter of my career, I started to get a lot of visibility and I have always had a presence on social media. So I started even back then getting hit up with folks like, well, I want to meet you and I want to pick your brain. And meanwhile, I'm hitting up other people being like, I want to pick their brain, because of what we talked about. No one's like, someone else has the answer to something. And so I was like, well, if I could pick other people's brains and report it, then maybe that's less picking that we all have to do. And it can serve more than just this one-off conversation. And so all of that sort of was kind of, the amalgamation of like me wanting to create space to hold space for these conversations. But, the show has really grown into a community of not just producers, but folks that are hungry to understand sort of like the entrepreneurial spirit that you have to really be in this industry and to withstand all of it. So really the psychology and the unity that folks feel because of the show existing is usually the most feedback I get. It's not really a how-to, it's more of like a survival guide, if anything.
In the year 2025.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yeah. And I know I was curious for you guys too. I know this isn't my interview necessarily, but how doing the podcast, how that's been going and how talking to these folks, like what you've been gleaning, how that's helping you in your careers respectively.
Tepper?
Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, Nick, you go. You can do it.
No, I mean, I feel like we started the podcast for very similar reasons. Like originally we were going to do a podcast about writing because we're writers, and very quickly we were like, let's open it up further because like Script Notes does exist. And so yeah, I think that was one of the things that I think really helped us was expanding it, because then we can talk to producers, creators, actors, all kinds of people. But yes, very similarly, like it's just been a huge learning experience and getting to talk to people. And I'm just happy that people find this stuff helpful, because yeah, I think we've had just some really incredible guests, and I feel like people like yourself, it's just a lot of people that we're like, we've been meaning to talk to about a lot of things for a very long time. So it's like an opportunity for us to do that.
Yeah, and I like what you said, kind of about like, instead of us just like all being on a call, it's like, oh, you can now, this can like live somewhere. And like people, and like me, sometimes like people will be like, oh, like how do I get a manager? And I'm like, oh my God, we have an episode like about that. Why don't you go check her out?
Timestamp.
Please refer to podcasts. But yeah, I just feel like kind of when me and Nick met on TikTok, we were both like, oh, both of us doing this like very niche thing at the time. I think it's grown a little bit. It's still kind of embarrassing sometimes and like sometimes less so. I'm not entirely sure. But it was like we were both putting ourselves out there, and we were like, we're getting a lot of like questions, and like it would just be nice to like talk and like meet. And like I like the fact that people listen, it's like so interesting to hear like that people in the industry actually like do listen to it. Like me and Nick are like, you're leveled in your career, but like I'm like this little emerging person, and I'm like, people are like, oh, I really enjoyed that episode you guys had, and I'm like, that's wild. You're like at Netflix like doing something, and I'm just over here. So it's cool to like see the reach, I guess.
Yeah, it's always interesting who it's gonna connect with. I will have like boomerangs of someone reach out to me randomly, be like, oh my God, I just heard your episode with this person, and I'm like, wow, I had recorded that like 4 years ago. I have no idea what it said. And like, I was crying at the end, and I'm like, oh, hopefully for a good reason. Like, I don't remember, but it's just so interesting. Yeah. Like I always call them like time capsules, and everyone who comes on the show gets so nervous. They're like, oh my God, I don't know what I said. And it's like, you said what was needed to be said in that hour. It is not meant to be like the amount, like your entire life story, like you know what I mean? Like it's just meant to exist as this time capsule of a conversation. I think Inside the Actor Studio was a big like inspiration for me because of my love for acting. And I hope I wanted to do like an Inside the Producer Studio again. Until I really, it's like nobody really cared about that. But I love just these like deep dives into people's journeys. Like I'm endlessly fascinated by it. I find it always inspiring. It always puts a pep in my step. It always gives me like, it's really interesting because the show is like therapy for me, because when I'm like, this is bullshit, fuck this, like I'm done, I'll be like editing an episode, or somebody reaches out of the blue and they're like, oh my God, this means so much and this has helped me so much, and then I'm just like, fuck, okay, fine, I'm not going anywhere. So really it's like it's a symbiotic relationship with folks, because I think at the end of the day we all want community. And as great as social media can be, we know that it's also can create an impression of what we think someone's life is, or it's always a highlight reel. And so I think to have a space where we can talk about it openly, about like, just because I'm doing XYZ doesn't mean I'm also not struggling in these ways, or that I'm also not, having these challenges that you are probably also having. And so I think that people really enjoy that level of, I think, transparency about it all.
Yeah,
totally.
Well, thank you so much. We do have one question that we have to ask before you go. Okay. We ask everyone, and you only have to pick one. So you just have to pick one of these. And we just like to hear a story about your time in Hollywood. It could be anything in your work experience, just existing in La La Land. A high, a low, or a hell no of just like an experience that you've had.
Sometimes I feel like it's a double-edged sword, because when we tell people about this at the beginning, they spend the whole episode thinking about what they're going to say, but then if we don't warn people, they're like,
Yes, or people are like, they're like, oh, I don't want to end on a bad note, but then like, no matter what, I kind of think the stories always are like, oh, that was a really good learning experience.
Yeah. What for the hell no is a what? What's like an example?
You can interpret
of, like,
it like however you want. What have people said for the hell no?
Well, I always like go back to Helena's of the like working for a pop star. It was like the hell no. Like never again will I work for a very famous A-list pop star.
I think I'm going to go with like a low that's going to end on a high.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to be more positive and stuff. But when I did, so The Female Brain was the first film that I ever like line produced on my own. And when I shifted into producing, I was doing like theater and shorts for anybody who wanted them because I was learning. And then I did the doc, Autism in Love, and that was like an incredible experience. And again, that's a deeper dive on my podcast about how that project came to be. But it was a gift from God and from the universe, and it was amazing. But what it wasn't was lucrative. And so what I did is I shifted gears into commercials, and then I found a producer who had produced at the time Short Term 12, which is one of my favorite films. And I went up to her and I was like, look, I have all this experience. Can I come learn with you? Because I don't want to start at the bottom. I'm not going to be an office PA, but like I can do, just give me one shot and I'll do it. And so she brought me under her wing. We ended up doing this movie called Girlfriend's Day, which was the very first independent Netflix feature that they had financed at the time. And I basically like was thrown in the deep end of the pool and just didn't drown, which I always say is the metaphor for my career. But she was like, you won't know if you really can do this until you've done it fully on your own, like without a mentor above you. So she's like, every producer has to do their first like $1 million movie to see if they still really want to be in it and they still really want to do this. And so she had recommended me for this movie that was coming through, and it was Whitney Cummings' directorial debut. She wrote it. She was in it. She directed it. It was a lot. Huge ensemble cast. We shot it here in LA, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done till this day for a lot of reasons, again, that I won't get into on mic. But I was so depressed making that film. I'm completely understaffed. It was just like me and a coordinator, and the accounting department was terrible. And so it was just like me having to also learn how to be my own accountant while making this movie, and also being on set with a first-time financier and explaining to them how things worked. It was just a lot of pressure. But I had incredible department heads that I'm still like homies with, super close with, that like kept me through, kept me alive. But when that show ended, I went into like such a deep depression of just like, if this is the bar of like working and I'm doing a feature on my own and I'm working with famous folks and this is what it's like I can't, this isn't for me. Like it takes too much of my precious non-renewable life energy to give to folks that ultimately are like indifferent about my contributions, you know? And so that was a real low, but I took some time, I did some traveling, and then I took space to zoom out, which is why I say when you go through these like challenging experiences, it's so important to take the time to process them, because when you're in them, you just don't have time as much as you think you do. You barely have time to buy toilet paper. So I was able to really zoom out and take all the learnings and go, okay, if I've done the hardest version of this for my own boundaries of what that means, then maybe it only goes up from here. And maybe the way I put teams together, and maybe my non-negotiables going forward, especially as someone that sometimes makes the budget, is to say, we can't cut these positions. Like, I can't do this project if you're cutting these positions, right? Which is what I did on that project to make it work. And the pressure that puts on you. And the production department will always be the first to, cut whatever they need from their department to give to the other children, always. And we're like the heartbeat of the production. And then, we're sort of like dying on the floor bleeding, but nobody cares. But anytime there's a person cut from a position or a department, it falls back on you. And that is the same independent producer spirit. You don't have a locations person, you're doing it. Oh, you don't have an accountant, you're going to do payroll. You're like, aside from very technicalized jobs, like you end up having to learn how to do a lot of things, which really services you. But yeah, I think it just was, in the end, a great experience that I had that trust from someone in a very short amount of time, that I was given this gift of like within a year of just like, go have fun. You guys hear me okay? Because I think you guys froze.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. To go do this, and then to like rise like a phoenix from the ashes, and be able to go, all right, now that I've gone through the worst version of this for myself, like, here are my non-negotiables going forward. And then from there on, like, I wouldn't say it was like, oh my God, everything was so easy and amazing. It's always hard. But I just was able to start to sharpen that muscle for myself, or that skill that I was talking about, of like, how am I going to navigate and move, and how do I not get bamboozled by certain people? How do I learn to read people better when they say something to me? And I think they're being honest, but I'm actually just being manipulated, right? So yeah, so that's what I'll say. It was a low
that's
that
a good
ended
one.
on a high. Yeah.
That is a good. That's. I feel like that's just like the painful lesson of Hollywood. Oh God.
I know, and it's
Some
all
people
about
are
how
the
you
worst.
survive those painful lessons. Truly,
Yeah.
And that was, I think, I've been very blessed. I've had very hard experiences, but like the good kind of hard, that really give you sort of like that tenacity that I talk about. I use that word a lot because I love it. I actually have the definition of it literally in front of me at all times, because that's something falling, because that's okay. Because that's kind of
nice.
like,
Oh my God, I love that.
I did a dinner last year to celebrate 5 years of the podcast, and we called it Creative Tenacity. I did it in partnership with this really cool company called Callow. Anyway, and we had this printed for everybody because it was about reminding everyone of the tenacity that is required to do any version of this, regardless of where you land. That resilience is so important.
Yes,
So,
resilience and grit. I need to go look up like tenacity to make sure that I'm like got that one added to my resilience and grit
Tenacity.
list.
I'll read it to you. It says the ability to continue despite obstacles, difficulties, or danger. It can also mean persistent determination or the quality of being tenacious. For example, someone who is tenacious might keep trying until they reach their goal, even if they encounter difficulties.
That is the film industry.
That is the
That's
film
it. That's
industry.
us.
Oh my
That's
gosh,
it.
I love
Tenacious
that.
D. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.